Hello and welcome to Math Hammer for Legions Imperialis. My name is Ryan, and today I would like to discuss some of the math behind the weapons in this game. In a future video, I plan to do some unit evaluations as well as other aspects of Legions Imperialis. For background, I am a data analyst, so this is kind of a passion for me. Spreadsheets are my friends. I find enjoyment in the mathematical aspects of these games, and to me, building armies is a puzzle that kind of exercises creativity and mental dexterity. This is not meant as a meta video or an end all be all, but more of an informed consent to what your options are and can be as we build armies for us newer players in this game. Without further ado, I wanted to present a Google Sheet, which is going to be available to everyone. I will include the link below. I have taken all of the weapons and included them into this first column by name and all of their statistics here. Now, there are additional columns used as a calculation into a conglomerate firepower rating. So this first column for the range, for example, I have provided a ranged rating. This is a formula based on a minimum range of 6, and it has multilinear aspects. So you get to a certain point and there is diminishing returns, and in fact a cap. So if you'll notice, a 100-inch range isn't actually 100 points for this. All in all, it comes down to roughly some of your mid-ranges, 12 to 24 inches, you're getting 2% increased firepower per range increment of an inch. And that's just to help out and delineate some of the weapons that have more range than others. And the minimum to that being 6 inches. So, for example, these Archaeotech pistols have a range rating of 0. Because if you're getting that close, that's kind of your base value. Moving on, the two easiest to calculate are the dice and the hits, because that is just basic dice statistic math. So 3 dice with 5 to hit is an average of 1 hit. Pretty easy to do. I'll come back to the additional hits from traits in just a moment. Now, the AP value as a negative is something that is a lot harder to calculate in order to determine how many of those average hits become wounds. So what I have done is actually taken all of the units in the game and entered them into an additional sheet and calculated the average save value. In this case, with this list, which has all the different variations, it comes out to an average of 3.34. However, with the actual spreadsheet and with removing some of the weapon options for the actual values, I brought it up to about 3.5. So this is not an end-all be-all number by all means, because your mileage may vary depending on what your opponent is running. Something to keep in mind with this value is later on when I evaluate units, I will give them a defensive rating based on the average. So if you are running like a Kratos tank, which has a much better save than the average, that will be reflected in the actual individual unit's defensive value rather than preventing wounds on the offensive rating. Again, we have a wounds from traits aspect, which I'll discuss in just a moment. And then we have a ranged offensive rating, which is a conglomerated value of all of these different things multiplied by increments of the range as discussed earlier. And that way we can evaluate what exactly is a good weapon or a platform or something we are looking for if we're looking for either efficiency or the best at doing a certain job, things like that. I have a column of limited units simply as a priority list. This is something that uh, isn't necessary at this point. It doesn't do anything with any of the calculations. However, it's kind of nice to note that um, whether or not some things are available on multiple things, like, okay, well, if we're looking for this specific weapon, it is only on the Daredevil, for example. This is something that I would typically recommend ignoring. The hardest part to do were the traits. When there is a light AT or anti-tank, there is now a separate column. This has been a request from some of my testers, as they wanted separate values for the armor, infantry, and flyers. Flyers is not fully on here yet. Uncertain as how that'll be addressed, but I'll show you what has been done with that. A lot of the values of the traits are static percentages, which I will show you in the next section. However, there are a few, like accurate, for example, rapid fire, things like that, engine killer, which can be statistically averaged into the actual hits or wounds. So, for example, accurate adds an additional, on average, 0.44 hits to the Anvilus autocannon battery. These things are very easy to calculate, or simple, not necessarily easy, and so I've included them into determining the average wounds and into the ranged offensive rating. The light blue designates part of it is not done or all of it is not done, as it may affect melee or building destruction. The two things for offensive ratings that I have not yet done yet are which units or weapons are good at destroying buildings and which units or weapons are good in melee. This is just a ranged offensive rating. So when we get to the actual values, you might see things like, I think the Cerastus Knight Lancer. Obviously, it's terrible at ranged because it's wholly meant to be a melee or close range platform. You'll also see the wounds from traits. This will be the additional engine killer values, things like that. It's really interesting. I think Armor Bane. Let's see if I can find a couple Armor Bane items here. Armor Bane additional wounds was incredibly low. This trait actually seems to have some of the worst returns of any of the traits involved. And I was kind of surprised by that. Accurate and rapid fire especially were a couple of the better ones. Moving on to actually what the values are, if you are interested, I do have an included worksheet with what has been done to give a value for each of the traits. So, for example, accurate, I have calculated the rerolls on non-hits. The rear arc, I put a minus 5% to the actual value of the ranged rating. Armor Bane, pretty simple, calculated rerolls on failed wounds. Anti-tank, put that on a separate line, things like that. Assault, the rationale behind this is if you are getting that close to an enemy, only about 40% of the time in our testing were you actually in range of the assault but not engaged. So that's why assault, even though it doubles your dice at half range, has less than a 50% increase to your ranged firepower. A lot of these dark blue, that means they're done completely and included. Blast was a hard one. Let me know if you have any feedback on that one. Burrowing is calculated as optimal but noted because typically if you're going to be using that, I think it's the mole something rapier, you are going to be shooting at those targets pretty much exclusively. A lot of things like coaxial, there's no change to that. Yellow are not done. These are often things that are only on one unit and that are not a high priority. They are going to be negligible in the grand scheme of things. And you kind of have to take those at face value and do a lot of testing or very complicated calculations that are not something I'm very interested in doing. The light blue are either building destruction or melee, as mentioned earlier. However, in this case, the heavy barrage and barrage do have a 5% increase already added to the ranged firepower. They are not simply done with the other aspects. Again, reach, rend. There's all kinds of different things. Siege, I ignored that one because there's none in the game yet. But you can see the rationale between each of these. And if you have any feedback on that, feel free to put it in the comments. I'm pretty active on the Discords where I'll be sharing this type of information, things like that. If you are interested in the actual calculations, for example, when we go to the weapons, this is my personal copy of the spreadsheet, but right here is the formula for the range rating. Average hits is going to be pretty easy. Additional hits from traits. Average wounds. If you want any of these, go ahead and pause it. Wounds from traits. And here's your ranged offensive power. It is a formulation based off of percentage increases of range and the wounds produced either from base or traits. When it comes to the units and how those are affected, I will cover this a lot more in a future video as I am not done. But by popular demand, pretty much everyone that has made any feedback has said there needs to be columns for armor and infantry separately. But right now, I have only calculated the overall firepower and the points per optimal ranged firepower. So, for example, you see people talking about these missile launcher tactical legionnaires. They are by far outperforming statistically every unit in the game to a large margin. It only costs 0.7 points per firepower rating, and if you look, even the support version is up here at under 1. There are quite a few units in here that do need a little bit of work. For example, the Kratos section here is going to be very different for armor versus infantry. And that's something I'll get calculated and look into in the next video. As for the other things that are coming up, there is an overall points per firepower per wound. So this is going to be how much you actually keep that firepower when you are taking damage. And the reason this is important is because your Fire Raptor, sure, it's got tons of firepower and ranged firepower, but you're going to be losing that firepower with just one wound. So if you want to create kind of a very durable army that keeps a lot of its oomph, because this is a bloody game. Like all of our tests have, the games are pretty much decided within the 3 turns and things like that. You can kind of go, hey, look, these missile launchers, because you're getting that 4 stands of them, they're keeping a lot of their firepower as well throughout their wounds that they are taking, or it's something that will be factored into this in the future is that defensive firepower. If you have any questions or would like additional information, I am not quite ready to publish the units section yet. Maybe I'll throw some of this basic information like A through K or A through L in there on the public spreadsheet. But I would love to hear any feedback you have. Again, this is just a passion project of mine. It's not meant as a hard meta. I just wanted to share my work and give back to the community that has been very open in getting this game going and becoming so popular, especially in our local area. We didn't expect anyone to play it because it is kind of expensive for the units, but the outpour of people that are enjoying it is great to see, and I want to see that grow. And that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoy this. Have a wonderful day.